Hi, good afternoon everybody and welcome to Derbyshire Community Bank Virtual AGM. My name's Jackie Littlewood. I work for ABCOL, which is a trade association for credit unions. We're just helping with the technology this afternoon and I'm just going to go through some housekeeping. So we've got 18 members that have joined us so far this afternoon. I'll just hand over to Mick to formally open the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, there.
Right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to go through the. I can't see the agenda from where I am, Jackie. It's obscured by the screen.
I'm just going to put the slides up. It won't be a second. There we go.
Good. Okay. So welcome to everyone. Normally at this point, when we're doing things in real time with real people present, I introduce the people who are sitting around me. But at the moment, I've got Jackie Littlewood from ABCOL and my Vice Chair Adele Atkinson, who's also standing in as Treasurer, and Claire Hale, Chief Executive Officer, who's been with us all of about 4 or 5 months, I think. We also have our supervisory, our one-person supervisory committee, John Filsack, and we have someone from our auditors. So what I want to do is to, first of all, go through the minutes of the AGM of last year. So I'll ask Jackie to put those on the screen. Okay, have you done that, Jackie?
They were sent out early this morning. All the parts and the packets available in the handout. So the minutes have been there on the screen. They have to go to the poll.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got 18 members on, 93% of those members have voted. It's 69% agree with the minutes and 31 abstain if they didn't attend. Are you okay for that poll to be closed?
Yep.
Okay. Just go back to the presentation.
Okay.
you.
Right, so I want to go through, you've got what you've got in front of you on the PowerPoint presentation is an abridged version of my report with the highlights, and whoever abridged it, I guess it was Claire, has done a pretty good job, I think. To begin with, the year in brief, there were a number of significant changes during the year, but there are three I want to focus on. The first one was the impact of the pandemic, which was felt mostly in the previous year, but there was still a hangover into the year under consideration here, 20 to 21. The second significant change was the move away from 38 Cornmarket to our new headquarters at Cubo in Victoria Street, which is literally just around the corner from where we were. And the third significant change was the appointment of our new chief exec, Claire Hale. In the midst of this, as you'll see when I go through the report, there were some significant changes in staffing. So anyway, I'll begin with looking at the loan income section of the report. So we need the next slide, Jackie. Loan application actually exceeded the previous year, as you'll see from this table, by around £64,000. Yet we were still 104,000 below the figure we achieved in 2018-19. However, we did exceed our target very slightly, just over £3,000, and we're looking to continue to extend our loan income in the future. This is obviously our principal source of income. Almost everything we earn comes from this. And what you're looking at in the table there shows just the last 3 years and where the loan income for a given month was, for a given month was above the previous year's corresponding month. It's shown in green, and where it was below, it's shown in red. And you can see there quite clearly the impact from March 2020 onwards of the pandemic, where month after month, right up until September, loan income was significantly below the levels achieved in previous years. Okay, next slide, Jackie. Moving on to the staffing implications, I want to spend a little bit of time on this because we had a number of things going on during the year. First of all, Sarah, who'd been our chief exec for somewhere, I think, around 7 or 8 years. She resigned in June, at the end of June 2021. Sarah actually had been living in France since the previous March. And while she used to travel back for essential meetings, including board meetings, the pandemic had put a stop to that. And so we'd had basically Sarah operating, and I have to say operating fairly effectively remotely with the staff. But she decided that she needed to devote herself full time to her business running the Chambre d'Hôte in France. And so we looked to appoint a new chief exec. Now, we did that, but unfortunately, our new chief exec resigned after only 2 months in post for various reasons. And so our operations manager, Shamila, took charge. Now, this was a difficult period because the relaxations in the COVID restrictions meant that there was an uptick in employment. Demand for employment was rising. Wages were rising, and a number of people were shifting jobs, including people from the credit union. And we did lose some experienced members of staff. We were already in a position where 2 of our most experienced members were off on long-term sick. And then in August, our next very experienced member got another job. And for a time, it looked as though we were going to lose our only remaining experienced staff member, but fortunately we didn't. But that was a very bleak period. We were operating well below the strength that we needed, and we did move to try to plug the gap with some agency staff, not entirely successful. We did employ some temporary staff and volunteer staff, which was reasonably successful, but it was still a massive impact in our ability to resource the organisation. In October, our new Chief Exec, Claire, took up her post. We did appoint 3 new part-time staff. And then shortly after that, in November, our operations manager, Shamila, left. And we are in the process of recruiting a business services manager to fill that post. Claire actually took up her post on the 1st of October. She had a very, very daunting task because, as I indicated, we were very low on staffing. I wouldn't even describe it as a skeleton staff. It didn't even merit that descriptor. We were struggling to keep on top of our various processes. And there are basically 2 key ones, loans and arrears. And that's where we focused our attention. Claire had to become familiar with our systems pretty quickly. We were committed to moving to a new office on December the 1st, so she had to deal with that, as well as overseeing the reparations to the old office and all of the various claims of obligations that we had to meet in leaving the old offices behind, and deal with ensuring that the move to the new office went smoothly, and that was a very difficult task. So I do pay tribute to the way Claire managed that extremely difficult process. Moving on to the next slide. Membership. I don't really have a great deal to say about this. When we moved into Derby some years ago, 7 years ago, I think, in fact, we were obviously looking to grow the Derby market, recognising that the opportunities for growth in the Erewash and Amber Valley were limited. Now, it is pleasing to see that that's actually happened year on year. The Derby numbers have increased, but you'll notice they're still significantly below the numbers for Ilkeston. So we know we've got a lot of work to do in Derby still, and we are doing it. The pandemic, of course, had a major impact on our promotional activities. We were limited to web-based activities, when with low levels of staffing, even our web-based promotional activities suffered. So that's an area where we will be ratcheting up activity in the future. Moving on to the next slide, dealing with shareholdings. We took a decision in 2018-19 to reduce our ISA interest rate and to close ISAs to new applications. The reason was we were getting too much money in for ISAs, and ISAs cost us more than other accounts, or were doing up to that point. And we basically, we don't need a lot of money sloshing about. We need money that we can lend out, and we weren't lending at that point. So we reduced the ISA obligation. We closed new applications, and from October the 1st, we see a dip in shareholding there from 1.6 million to 1.43 million as a result of that decision. We did, however, get an upward movement in membership from then on, and that was helped very much by the Money Spider merger that took place just over 3 years ago. Membership growth is an important priority for us moving forward, and now that we appear to be more or less operating normally, that's what we'll be looking at. Moving on to the next slide. The table value of loans, this is more important to us than the number of loans, really. The lending value between April and September 2020, there's a result of the pandemic, that sharp decline, its lowest level for 8 years. We do expect the number of loans to continue to grow, and we do expect the value of loans, therefore, to continue to grow. The interesting thing is that the number of loans approvals only declined marginally from 2018-19 and exceeded the levels recorded in the previous 2 years. The implication for that is that the average size of loans has continued to decline, and that's in line with the policy decision that we made, I think, 2 years ago, that we move away from higher value to lower value loans for a number of reasons. One of them is that the impact of a default on a higher value loan is clearly much greater. So that's the value of loans. Next slide, please. Continuing that analysis, you can see the average loan size declining from 641 in 2016-17 down to 436. And yet the number of loans approved has increased. Now, it's important to bear in mind that increase in the value of loans and the increase in the number of loans as we move on to the next slide, please. There is a paradox in that the value of loans in 2019-20 declined, but the income from lending increased. And that's something that we need to always bear in mind. As I pointed in this slide here, the projections and commitments for 2020 and beyond, we need to be cautious about, because we know that the significant drop in the value of lending that we experienced in 2021 will continue to be felt for some time in our bottom income line. And that is that our income from lending isn't contingent only upon what we're lending now, it's contingent upon lending levels that we've had for the previous 2, 3 or 4 years. And we're still feeling the impact of the pandemic decline. So our loans numbers are high, our loans value is increasing, but our annual loan income last year did decline, and that's the paradox. However, the recovery in volumes leads us to be fairly confident about an improvement in the income from lending, and we expect to be somewhere in the region of 400,000 in the current year. Next slide, please, Jackie. Financial performance. At face value, we appear to have had a significant fall off in our financial performance. In the previous year, 1920, we had an outturn surplus of 69,500. The surplus this year was 12,387,000. However, if you look at the figures over a period of time, it's actually not bad. I mean, we recorded a negative figure every year from 2014-15 right up to and including 2018-19. The position for the previous year was inflated. That figure of 69,000 included a one-off cash injection as a result of the Money Spider merger, and also a business support grant that we received from local government, funded by central government, for the fall off in COVID activity. The figure for 12,387 also requires a health warning. Firstly, all of the various reparations, dilapidations and legal fees associated with the move meant that we had a one-off cost of £26,700, and that significantly reduced our trading surpluses. Secondly, the extreme staffing shortages we experienced for part of the year meant it was impossible to keep up to date with arrears and bad debts. And it's still not possible, therefore, for us to quantify exactly where we are. But we have agreed that we will catch up and fill in the outstanding figures throughout the year. So we will see our trading position for the current year impacted negatively as a result of this. And given the overall financial sensitivities, the board therefore is recommending a dividend, albeit a modest dividend, of 0.25% for the year, and we'll come on to that as a vote very shortly. Next slide, please. Year-end reserves, because we made a small surplus, we were able to add to our reserves, and our reserves have been growing now for a couple of years. We were down to about 230,000 a couple of years ago. We're now up to almost 250,000 in reserves, and our intention is to try to maintain that at a healthy level. Bad debts. Credit unions, particularly community-based credit unions, are obsessed with bad and doubtful debt, because that's the area, that's what costs us a lot of money. We operate in what's known technically as a subprime market. It's not a market where people have secured loans. These are unsecured loans for people who have often a fragile credit history, and making decisions about loans is tricky. We get it right most of the time, but we don't get it right all the time. And we do have a number of people who borrow from us with no intention of ever repaying it, unfortunately. If you look at the charts, you'll see right from 2015 to the present, we had an enormous increase in bad debts a few years ago. We've sort of stabilized that. The figure for the current year appears to be, for the last year that we're considering, 20 to 21, appears to be good. But as I said in my report, the staffing crisis of that summer left us with insufficient resources to keep on top of loan requests and the chasing of arrears, and we had to keep on top of lending, and arrears had to go by the wayside. So any attempts to plug the gap didn't mean that we suffered from recording bad debts. So the numbers there are too low, as I indicated earlier. Moving on to the next slide, Jackie. This is the CREDS report. This is the short for the credit union source book, which under the auspices of the Financial Services Authority, sorry, the Financial Conduct Authority, represents the rules and guidance specific to credit unions. The ratios provide one of the key yardsticks by which the performance of individual credit unions is measured, and they're reported to and discussed monthly by the board, and they're reported to the FSA. And these are the latest credit ratios. The green column down the side indicates that they're all okay. The one that's a little bit, well, I wouldn't say it was dodgy, but it's the one that's not within our range, between 70 and 80%, is net loans as a percentage of total assets. Just very briefly, I wouldn't want to bore you with the whole of this, but the top one, capital as a percentage of total assets, that's an important one because that represents liquidity. And, you know, it's important, obviously, to remain liquid. Now, the regulator's ratio for a credit union of our size is a liquidity ratio of 10%. We're well above that, which is good in one sense, but not so good in another, because we've got too much liquidity, we've got too much cash sloshing around, which has not been lent. So that's one of the reasons why we need to lend more. We do have quite a significant amount of headroom there. And then the next one, right down at the bottom, that one in orange, net loans as a percentage of total assets. The peer average is around 58%, so we're more or less in line with other credit unions. But that describes, if you like, short-term future profitability, because that figure needs to be somewhere between 70 and 80%. We want to be lending out, getting on for 80% of the funds that we have. So lending out 57.1% means that we are falling short on maximising income from lending. So that's the financial ratios. I'd like to say a final word, for which there is no slide. We do work with a number of key partnerships, and we're very grateful for them. And it's something that we continue to build on, our partnerships locally within Derbyshire and within the city. The credit union movement is complex. It remains complex, and it is challenged. It remains challenged by particularly bad and doubtful debts, and the hangover from the pandemic is still providing us with some challenges. With that in mind, I'd like to convey my appreciation of the professional and dedicated approach taken by both our past and our new chief exec and her team in continuing to develop and modernise the operations of the credit union. I'd also like to mention my appreciation of Sarah Osborne, our CEO for the previous 7 years, who did navigate the bank through a very turbulent period. And I also need to express my sincere gratitude to my colleagues on the board who meet regularly to steer us in the right direction, and of course to our members, without whom none of this would exist at all. I am standing down now. This is my last official action as chair of the Derbyshire Community Bank. I've been the chair for 9 years. Our rules book states that I should be chair for 5 years and then stand down. I did attempt to stand down, I do assure you of that. I couldn't find people who were prepared to take over, but I'm delighted to be standing down now, and I'm very confident in my successor, Simon, who I'll be handing over to after this meeting. And that concludes my report. So we move on then to John and our one-man supervisory committee.
Hello, everybody. I'm John, and I've recently taken over the supervisory role. The report that you have in front of you, I don't think is really what you expect to see as a supervisory report. And you will see on there, I think, the reason for it. That during the year, the person that was doing that work left. There was a hiatus when that person wasn't there, and I kind of stepped in towards the end of the year, and as a consequence, I think largely of all the staffing things that Mick's been talking about, the priority in the credit union was to keep the show on the road rather than to induct a new supervisory officer. And it's really only this month that I now have full access to all the systems that I need to interrogate in order to do the job. As you can see, I have considerable experience with credit unions, although it's not recent, and part of my learning has been catching up with how regulation has moved on since I was last involved in credit unions. So that's the first page, and on the second page. Again, we don't have a great deal to report, but this simply shows you the kind of things that the supervisory role involves, and I hope to be pursuing that thoroughly in the future. It would be good if somebody could join me in doing this. I think things work much better when you've got somebody else to bounce things off. So if there's anybody out there that fancies this supervisory role, I'd be pleased if they would come forward. Don't think there's anything else I can say here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. At the end of this meeting, we will be reopening that point that John just mentioned about people who may wish to get involved in the credit union in whatever capacity, maybe as a member of the board or maybe as a member of the supervisory committee. It's a vitally important role. It is the internal audit function for the credit union. It makes sure that we're following our own rules and our own regulations, that we're doing things properly. And the supervisory committee chair has the right to attend every meeting of the board to ask whatever questions they want, and we have to respond to it. So it's quite an important task. So if there is anyone who's interested in doing that, then you will have an opportunity to do that, and we'll return to that at the end. Okay, I want to move on to the Treasurer's report. If we can have the first page up for that one, Jackie. Unfortunately, Pat, our Treasurer, can't be here at this meeting. And so our Vice Chair, Adele, has agreed to step in and apply her considerable knowledge of the finances to this report. Adele.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you very much for joining us all. As Mick said, this is Pat's Treasurer report. I don't particularly feel the need to read it through you verbatim. Just the highlight points that are on the slides and in your handbook, we've had a more stable year of 2020 and 21, more the finances than the actual people, and we've been able to continue a recovery from the effects of the pandemic, and that has shown an overall audited surplus of just over £12,000, and the loan book has increased. The Treasury report does mirror what Mick has actually already mentioned within his chair's report, but the income has exceeded the expenditure by 4.1%. Grant income has been reduced significantly from the previous year, and I think most organisations within the voluntary sector has noticed that grant income is reducing, and this is where most organisations, predominantly within our sector, need to start looking at finding our own sustainability and moving forward on that. So we have had grants in the past which has supported different areas in Derbyshire and staff members, and with that actually being reduced, that's where staff members have been on the decline. Can I have the next slide, please? The balance sheet is as it says. You've had this in your pack. Our total assets are on the increase. Our member shares are increased. The surplus before tax, which has been discussed by Mick, is down, considerably down on last year, part and parcel to staffing structure and also the building move. The general reserves, they're increased this year on last year. Next slide, please, Jackie. The business plan. We've approved the business plan. We have a 1 to 3 year business plan which has always been approved, and we regularly, every year, we have a strategy meeting of the board members to look at our budget, to look at the business plan, to look at where we are, where we've been and where we hope to go in the future. We're in a strong position in line with compliance and regulation, and our reserve levels and also our capital to asset ratio is exceeded of what their expectation and requirement is. With the £12,000 surplus that we are reporting, we would like to recommend that a small dividend of 0.25% is paid to members with savings this year. And I believe later on, the next slide, possibly the next action, will be about the members of the group voting on that. A brief picture of our audited accounts. If you do at any point need to see the full audited accounts following this meeting, I'm sure that if you contact via email through into Claire on the main admin email, we will be able to provide you with the full audited accounts for you to view. But that is actually our snapshot for you to see at this meeting. And then I believe I'm passing to our auditor. Oh, we're going to vote now, right? Thank you. Jackie, if you'd like to do the vote.
Cal just wants a poll. That was quick. 100% of members that have voted, and it's an unanimous yes for the dividend to be paid.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, we move on to the appointment of auditors. We do have Kevin Booth from our auditors present. If we do have any questions that anyone has posted which Kevin needs to answer, but for the time being, we are recommending the reappointment of Alexander Sloan as auditors for the financial year 21-22, and that's the next vote coming up now.
Again, that's 100% of members that have voted, and we've got 19 members on at the moment, and it's a unanimous yes.
Thank you. We now move on to the election of directors and the supervisory committee. Every year there are some board members who stand down, and there are members who we will have co-opted during the year who need to be formally voted onto the board. This year, sorry to say that Leah Taylor stepped down as a result of the pressures of work, but we're delighted to have co-opted Simon onto the board and John Filsack as a supervisory committee. Do we have a vote on this, Jackie?
We do, just bear me a second. So we've got 100% of members that have voted, and it is unanimous, yes.
Thank you. And our final vote. No, it's not our final vote. We have to look at the board's recommendation to re-elect the remaining directors en bloc.
And again, that's going in at 100%. It's majority, yes.
Thank you. And then our final vote is the election of the chair. And we are delighted that Simon has indicated his willingness to stand as the chair, which the board fully supports. And we're asking our members to support Chair Simon's election as chair of the board.
And again, that's 100% of members who voted, and it's a majority vote.
Thank you. So I'm pleased about that. So we move on to the final slide. Do we have, Jackie, you'll have received questions that people will have sent in. Do we have questions at this point which we need to look at, which we need to answer?
There hasn't been any questions.
Okay.
Gordon Thomas said hello, and Simon just had a question about the minutes of from the last AGM, which were in the pack. But other than that, there's no questions that have come in at all.
We've had one question which was submitted prior to the AGM, and the member who's raised this question, I have contacted them directly because it's a slightly more complicated question, but essentially in a nutshell, the question was about junior savings accounts and the fact that we don't currently have the facility to manage these exclusively online. And the reason for that is that quite often they're opened by a third party, but the person who will ultimately support the person who's benefiting from that savings account is quite often a parent. And so our system at the moment is set up so that normally it would be whoever opens an account has the management entirely of that account. So junior savings accounts don't work quite with that process. As it's currently set up with our app and sort of our existing systems. So there's still a more manual process around managing those accounts. I am now, it's been raised looking into the possibility of whether that's something that we can address and whether it will be possible to add those to the suite of actions that can be managed online or whether there are other barriers to that. But I will feed back directly to that member And if it is possible for us to move that to being managed in a more kind of straightforward online manner, then we gladly will do. But unfortunately, I've not been able to get a conclusive answer to that ahead of this meeting.
Okay, thanks for that, Claire. Going back to this final slide then, this was referred to by John earlier, the Supervisory Committee. We would still like to expand our board. We have 8 members on our board. We don't want the board to be too big and cumbersome, but we have always stated that we'd like to get closer to about 10 members. There is always opportunities for volunteers, and anyone who may be interested in volunteering, it doesn't need to be many hours, it doesn't need to be many days, but there are a number of reasons why people may want to volunteer, and if you do, then please make contact. How do we make contact, Jackie?
We'll know the results of the poll, so you can contact the people direct after
Lovely.
the AGM.
Thank you. I have no other business notified to me. Is there any other business that anyone would like to raise? No.
Nothing been typed in. If anybody wants to type anything in whilst we're putting the last poll up. And we'll just double check at the end of the poll. Is there anybody interested in becoming a member of the Supervisory Committee, a board member or volunteer? So we will have the names of people that are showing an interest in the credit union and be able to contact you direct in the coming days. We've got some interest in the Supervisory Committee and volunteering. Just leave the vote open a little bit longer. We've got 87% of members that have voted. Again, if it's something that you think about after the meeting, then by all means contact the credit union direct. Got 87% of people voted. Do you want to leave it a little bit longer, Mick?
I think we know where we are now. I think we can end it at that point. Yeah. Good. Very good. Well, thank you for that. All it remains for me to do is to sincerely thank those people for turning up, those members for turning up for this AGM. I know you haven't had to come here in person, but it is appreciated that you actually participate in the annual general meeting. And also our thanks to ABCOL, Jackie and ABCOL, for hosting this event remotely, not a medium that I like to work with. But I guess we're going to see more of it in the future. But I think the future probably rests with people other than me. So thank you all very much. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Jackie, for hosting it. And I declare the meeting closed.
And thank you, Mick.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. To leave the AGM, if you go to your control panel at the top right-hand corner of your screen, it's File, Exit, and Leave Webinar.